Yo, 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 hey, hi, hello. You're listening to a roster reconstruction podcast here on the Swish Theory Podcast Network. This is Garrett Bouguet here with you, along with the other two members of the Big Three. That is Corban Ford and Josh Earl. We're going to do another Operation Rebuild episode tonight, and we're going to be talking about the Houston Rockets. But first off, we'll start with Corban, then go to Josh. How you guys doing?
I'm doing well. Well done, Garrett. I just gotta say, love the intro. The hey, hi, hello. You really nailed it there. I'm doing okay. Coming off a bout of the flu, so it's not been super great. It also caught me by surprise when it happened. Just don't be working out before it hails, apparently. Yeah. There's a story behind that. I'll save it for later. Anyways, aside from that, I'm doing great. Love talking basketball with my brothers here, and it's gonna be a blast. Should be a lot of fun.
And I'm doing well. Just looking forward to talking some more basketball and some more kind of roster construction stuff in the context of the Houston Rockets with you two wonderful gentlemen.
Yeah, so the last couple of these that we've done, we've focused on the Charlotte Hornets and the Atlanta Hawks, and I feel like this Rockets team is kind of more in the Atlanta Hawks territory of where their rebuild is. And, they've obviously had a great stretch as of late. How many games have they won? 11 in a row at this point?
Yep.
11 games in a row. They put themselves in competition for the play-in in the Western Conference. Very similar to, where Atlanta is in the East at the 10 seed. Houston is right on the heels of the 10 seed in the West behind Golden State. So they are playing really good basketball. They've got a very young core and a lot of guys to discuss. I guess we'll start with Josh here. I guess when you're looking at this Houston Rockets team, and I think I know your answer on this, but how do you feel about their young core and what they've got brewing there in Houston?
I'm probably one of the people who's lowest on this core compared to most. It's just not really my style. Jabari Smith has been playing better this year. Amin has had some nice flashes and had some productive games. Şengün had a really good season up before the injury. Looked like he was kind of getting more consistent. I do really like Tari Eason. And then Cam Whitmore has been what you would expect Cam Whitmore to be, given how he performed in college and everything. And these are all, and then Jalen Green is currently on a massive uptick at the moment, which I have no doubt we will talk about later. So I'll save the heat on that one for now. But it's a pretty big young core in the sense this team has more young players with a high level of talent, a high potential ceilings and all that sort of stuff than most other rebuilds. And that's because the last 3 seasons before this one have been really, really bad, ridiculously bad. And so they were able to get some quality picks and that sort of thing. I wouldn't say it's a bad core per se, but just not a core that I find particularly interesting or that I'm particularly fond of.
Yeah, and I want to kind of get Corban's thoughts on this as well. But the one thing that I think is part of the reason why maybe this young core is a little bit more divisive than others around the league is just that I think a lot of these players, a lot of this young core, these guys have some pretty strong strengths and some pretty strong weaknesses, right? You look at a guy like Cam Whitmore, does not know how to pass, right? Jalen Green's decision-making has been questioned for a long time throughout his career. Şengün is one of the slowest guys in the entire NBA, right? So you've got these, and Amen Thompson can't shoot. So, but at the same time, Şengün, really crafty post player, really good passer. Amen Thompson, one of the best athletes right now in the entire league. Same with Jalen Green. Cam Whitmore is really strong and can already shoot the basketball and drive the ball well to the hoop. So, a lot of these players are really polarizing. And, I feel like I also know Corban's feelings about this team. But yeah, Corban, what do you think about this young core that they've got here? And again, they've drafted, they've got a lot of high picks, and they've also drafted pretty well, even into the middle of the first round with guys like Tari Eason and Şengün, as well as Whitmore.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting, nuanced discussion when we talk about this team and their young core. I definitely agree with all the negative points that were brought up about them, or reasons to pause when you think about their core. But I do think they're an intriguing blend of talent. I think they definitely have a tentpole star in their midst. And I think it's interesting when we talk about what goes into not only a young core, but the development timeline for that core, for each individual player, right? How they gel together, the context with which they are together, put together, whether it is through coaching, whether it is through the play style, right? And when you have these young guys who have their own intriguing kind of looks, they definitely have potential in different ways, but trying to make that all work together. Should it work together? These are questions that really come into play when you think about this Houston Rockets team. And so that's something I'm very curious about, because each player on their own, yes, I see a lot of intriguing intangibles, right? At the same time, there's big question marks for each one. But then ultimately, can they all gel together as a team? And can this work in a fashion that obviously is suitable for team success? So that's from the top down. That's one of the bigger questions I have, but I definitely think it'll be a really fun conversation, talk about this core that they do have assembled, because I don't know, I don't look at them and go, wow, I can see all of these guys on the next great Houston Rockets team in 5 years. Maybe one of those guys is a key person in a trade to get that guy. Who knows? But ultimately, I think that there are some intriguing potential building blocks here for this Rocket squad.
So yeah, I feel like there's plenty of directions we could go here. We could obviously go to Ime Udoka as the head coach and some of the free agents they brought in, but I feel like we'll save that for a little bit later and just dive right into what are some of the really important decisions that are upcoming for this Rockets team, which this offseason they can extend both Şengün and Jalen Green, and we've seen just in this season alone how perhaps those two guys don't necessarily fit that well together. Of course, Şengün, I already mentioned, one of the slowest players in the NBA, very methodical. He's, not going to be that well suited for a team that plays a really fast pace, and he's more effective in the half court. And then you've got Jalen Green, who, again, is this lightning rod of an athlete, wants to get up and down, wants to utilize that athleticism. And, Houston had a pretty decent start to the season and had a pretty good defense right out of the gate. And the offense was, average, a little below average, but decent, running the offense through Şengün and, pick and rolls with him and Van Fleet. But now that Şengün has gone down, we've seen this team play with Amen Thompson more as a point forward, and Jalen Green getting more reps on the ball and getting more opportunities to up that usage rate, and also this team just to play faster. And they've gone on this great run, which has put them in position to compete for a play-in spot. But yeah, when you look at the decision this team has to make, what are your guys' thoughts in terms of, should they be focused on Şengün? Should they be focused on Green? Should they be happy with both of them and just, try and figure out that fit as time goes on? Yeah, what are your thoughts there? And I guess we'll start with Josh.
It's definitely an interesting conundrum for them, because you could argue, and it's to different degrees, right? That both players, both Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün, have not had the best 3 seasons before leading into, extension eligibility. And you have to kind of weigh how much of this season, which has featured kind of breakouts for both of them, Şengün from like the start of the season up to his injury, and then Jalen Green the last 15, 16 days, however many days, like month.
About a month and a half.
Yeah, about a month. Like
And a half.
You've had kind of the best stretches from both of them have been in this third season. And part of that is because like the first 2 seasons, the context was just horrible. Like from just in general, the franchise, horrible context. The coaching was not doing the players any favors. The front office seemingly wasn't really like trying to put a cohesive competitive team out there so much as like, let's just give the young guys free reign and let them figure it out. And so this season, with that new context and the fact that, Şengün is going to miss a relatively significant portion of the season. And how does that impact how much weight you give to his performance this season? And then Jalen Green, up until this stretch, has been the same as he has been the first 2 seasons of his career, not that good of an NBA player. And so, again, it's one of those things where like, how comfortable are you with this season and this context and their breakouts in terms of those extension eligibility discussions with the players and their agents, and like how much are you willing to bet on Şengün and to bet on Green going forward? And obviously we'll dive into this further. I know Corban's already worked up. And then the other question is, like you said, Garrett, seemingly Green wasn't unlocked until Şengün went down. And that's not to say that it isn't possible to have like a mostly transition focused team where Şengün then becomes the focal point if the transition has to convert into a half court possession. Like in theory, you could still do that. The question is like, will that work for everyone? And will these flashes from Jalen and from Şengün, are they like legit? Are they something that you can really build around those two together? And if so, like, again, how much are you willing to go to bat for them financially speaking? And then the other thing to remember is they're going to be restricted free agents after next season anyway. So like, even if you don't meet their demands, or if there's a disconnect in the value they feel they are owed versus what you're kind of comfortable giving to them at this point in the offseason, you still can let them go to restricted free agency, and you have the right to match any offer sheet they get. So like, it's not something where it has to be 100% decided this offseason, but there is definitely pressure on this Houston Rockets front office to kind of weigh this third season and both of their leaps, and like how much of this is real and long term, and how much of it might have just been like new context, and is that the context that we'll have going forward? Anyway, I cede the floor to Corban.
I gotta say, there's a few points that you make that I completely agree with. In that, the Rockets do have time to evaluate. And they have these players that now, on the one hand, like, you definitely want to be mindful. I mean, the money's probably going to go them anyway, but you want to be mindful of, okay, before I give it to you, like, am I seeing enough flashes, right? I do think one player we've seen enough, but for the most part, I agree with where you're coming from with this. I think for me, the issue is just knowing, how do I put this? I don't know, when you see something good and you know where it's going as a franchise, don't play games. Don't play games. Like, go for the gold. Right? That's my pump up speech. Because you go restricted free agency with a clear bona fide star. I want to mention which player I'm referring to, but a guy who's like blowing up right now. If you put restricted free agency and another team makes an offer, I mean, one, you might ruin good vibes if you don't give the guy what he's looking for. And that's something that you have to deal with later, right? Diminishing returns, these people are players. Like, we say assets, and that's already a divisive term to use around players in general. even from a team construction standpoint, like saying words like that. But I'm not even saying it like that. I'm just saying at the end of the day, these are people playing basketball, right? They're great basketball players, but they're people. Feelings can be hurt. Some things can't be mended. So you have to worry about that when you take a player and you go, you know what? I do value you, but I don't know if I value that much to not go out there in open market and see what happens. And I think if that player has enough, I don't know, I don't want to say potential, but they've shown enough in your mind that you can go, you know what? I don't want to do that. I'm locking you in. You're here. That's one thing. If you're like, hey, I don't know. Like, I think the cost effective or the cost, the trade-off of potential hurt feelings over me making a very costly decision, both on the floor and off, by retaining you prematurely is the thing you have to worry about. But when you look at the Rockets, at least the two guys that are extension eligible, one in Alperen Sengun, I'm not the biggest Alperen Sengun fan. Just not. Like, he's okay. He's a very solid player. I just think that a team built around him, I don't think you build a team around a guy like Sengun. I think that he is a supporting player, and I think that that's great because in his absence, we've seen a player pop up that can really be the tentpole lead player for the squad. And with that, I see the floor to Garrett.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up a lot of interesting points, and that's where this offseason is so critical for the Rockets because, you know, when it comes to someone like Jalen Green, you do worry from the team side that, like, okay, he has this run at the end of the year. Now all of a sudden his agent is going to come in and say, like, this player you saw for these 15 games is who Jalen Green is, so give him the max, right? But as a team, especially when it comes to an extension, you want it to be a situation where hopefully it can be a win-win, right? Where the team is saving some money and not just giving him the maximum amount of money the player can receive. Because if you're going to give that, you might as well just wait it out and give it to him the following season, in my mind. But then at the same time, you want to make sure that the player, as Corban mentioned, is happy, doesn't feel slighted by your offer. And then also feels like they get a level of security that, you know, they, again, the contract that either of these guys are likely to sign would be life-changing money, right? So yeah, I'll ask this question to Josh first and just say, like, okay, when it comes to Jalen Green, you know, we've seen this 10 to 15 game stretch, right? And he's been really impressive. But as you rightfully stated, prior to that, for the majority of his play on his rookie contract, he has been a subpar basketball player. But if he plays as he's played these last 10 to 15 games for a full season next year, I would say it's very likely that a team is going to offer him the max.
Was there a question in that, or just to stay? Anyway,
I guess yeah. Just the question
like,
being, like, you know, as the Rockets, you know, how much are you putting into this, you know, smaller sample in terms of, like, whether you feel comfortable offering him the max or starters level money next, you know, this off season? Or would you say that, like, no, we're going to offer less than starter money and you got to prove it to us next year before you get the level of money of maybe what you've deserved based on how you've played just very recently?
Yeah. So I think the best for both parties actually is to, like, let's agree to play this next season out. And, like, let's agree that, like, you are, if you play the way you have been playing, we, like, at the end of that next season, we are going to offer you this size contract. Like, if you're playing this way consistently, guess what? We do want to keep you, and we want to keep you at a high price point that you feel valued at. The other benefit about, like, letting it play out that way, for the team side, is if, like, this is more of a highlight and not the, like, new average, it somewhat protects you, and you can still kind of, you know, you can still offer them a contract after in restricted free agency. You can still match a restricted free agency offer, and everyone kind of notes that, like, you know, let's say another team offers him the max as a restricted free agent. A max offer sheet signed by another team is still going to have favorable terms compared to a max you offered them. Like it'll be a year shorter at most, and it'll be like shorter annual increases in between the seasons. So like, even if Jalen Green gets a max offer sheet in restricted free agency, like assuming the Rockets are willing to match that, like it would still be a lesser max than if they had offered him the max in the first place. So like, there is a little bit of a safety net there, but Corban's absolutely right. You can injure that relationship with the player. And furthermore, you can injure that relationship with their agency, who can represent lots of other players who maybe then will try to steer clear of your franchise. And it really comes down to how much you weigh this stretch. And yes, he's been playing fantastically, but his career averages to this point sound the per game stuff sounds great. 19.8 points per game, 4.1 rebounds per game, 3.3 assists per game, but the shooting splits are atrocious. 42.3% from the field, 34%. He's below league average from three on over 1,500 threes. And we know that 3-point percentage tends to equalize after 750 attempts. He's over twice that. So it's far more likely that his 3-point percentage is going to be closer to that 34% than it is the current amount that he's hitting. Now, that's not to say that this isn't an actual leap. It very possibly could. The question is just, how much do you weigh? You know, it's been 13 games. How much do you weigh 6% of his career versus the previous 94% of his career? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. If you think this leap is real, you got to weigh it heavier. If you don't think this leap is that real and you'd prefer to wait it out, then you're going to weigh it a little less. So like, it really depends on how much you believe that this is a leap versus a highlight.
Yeah, and I think a big element of like, you're eliminating like a huge downside with your strategy, right, Josh, of just waiting it out, because you're not going to give what could be potentially an inflated contract to a guy that ends up saying, you know, for instance, like the DeAndre Hunter contract with the Atlanta Hawks, right, where they kind of paid him hoping that he would improve or become the player that he was for brief stretches that he showed in his rookie deal. And he's proven to be a little bit less than, you know, his best flashes. And then you've got a player that's making more than he probably is worth. But at the same time, choosing that route also lowers your upside, because there's a possibility where, you know, Jalen Green and his agent are willing to take a bit of a discount this offseason, again, getting the money a year ahead of time and taking a little bit less. And then he is this player that he's shown. And now all of a sudden, it's like a Mikal Bridges situation where you've got one of the best contracts in the league.
Rebuttal.
It's possible. Like that again, that's one of those things where like nothing is 100% guaranteed either way, right? Like at this point in time, we don't necessarily know if this is for real, like the new normal for Jalen Green, or if this is a really hot stretch for him, which is really good and really tantalizing, but you don't know for sure. And therefore, like you said, Garrett, it could wind up being a great contract. It could also wind up being a bad contract. And that's where this offseason becomes, and this is just Jalen Green we're talking about. And this is part of the reason we're doing the Houston Rockets, is because of diverse, I'll just say diverse opinions Corbin and I have on Jalen Green. But like the same kind of discussion holds sway with Alperen Şengün too. Like, again, he's had a really good season this season, which we've noted is a totally different context than the first 2 years. So like similar type of question comes up with Şengün in the sense of like, how much do you believe this season is Şengün going forward versus like him in a new context where, maybe that context based on this win streak that we have with him out might not even be the context going forward. Like maybe we do want to pivot away from playing through Şengün, and we maybe want to pivot towards more like we have during this stretch, and therefore maybe we're less willing to pay Şengün. And this also brings up, and I'll let Corbin rebuttal after this. This also brings up, like, you can also trade either of these guys too. Like this offseason, you could, in theory, trade them and get someone else that you think works better with the piece that you're keeping. So, like, there's a lot of possible ways this offseason can go for the Houston Rockets, which is why it's an interesting discussion.
Yeah, so I like this. I agree. It definitely is an interesting discussion. I do want to pause on Şengün first. Like, sure, we'll give him conversation. I do think talking about Jalen Green in context is really, really important right now. So first off, listen, Jalen Green, as it stands right now, like today. By the way, just randomly, no really need to bring it up, but Rockets have won 11 in a row. Jalen Green just dropped 34 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, right? The point I'm trying to get at is this. Jalen Green is 21 years old. As of right now, he is 21 years old. He will be 22. No, he's 22. He just turned 22. My bad. Just turned 22 in February, right? So we're not even a 23-year season. When he first came into the NBA, he was with a Houston Rockets team that was in massive turnover, had just let James Harden go. James Harden played all of 8 games. He was on a team that I love Stephen Silas, but as a coach, he was coached by Stephen Silas, team that went 20-62, a team where he finished, and I have to say, he finished as the second leading scorer on that team. That's literally taking a rookie at 19 and saying, here, do something. Literally, it was him and Christian Wood. Christian Wood, for all of his flaws, a talented scoring big, but like, come on now. The value added context wasn't there. His point guard was Kevin Porter. His next main man was Eric Gordon, who was already checked out mentally after James Harden had left. After that, you had Jason Tate, a very talented role player who was not known as a scorer. After that, Dennis Schroeder, who played all of 15 games. Then we go to Garrison Matthews. Then we go to a guy named Alperen Şengün, right? Then KJ Martin, Daniel Tice, I can go on. But that was the first year, 2021, 2022. The next season, same, coached by Stephen Silas. Great man. They finished 22-60. All I'm saying. Okay? Fine. Now, he is your leading scorer. Again, similar situation. Kevin Porter Jr. is still your point guard. Alperen Şengün is playing better now. He's averaging 14 points a game. You still have Eric Gordon, who is still surprised that he's still on the team. New rookie Jabari Smith Jr. Then KJ Martin and Tari Easton, who reminds me of Jason Tate, a very talented player whose scoring is not the main thing on their game. I just listed the top 6 scorers for the Houston Rockets in 2021 to 2022. I'm sorry, 2022, 2023. Now, we finally get 2023, 2024. Stephen Silas, God bless him, no longer coaching of the Houston Rockets, right? Now we got Ime Udoka, right? Got a totally different team, right? You have Fred VanVleet in the building. You got Dylan Brooks there. Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Jeff Green, right? Now, the team is mostly, I don't want to say built around Alperen Şengün, but you had a down half of the season from Jalen Green, trying to figure out, one, how to blend his, at this point, inefficient shooting, but even worse, the shot tendencies he had from playing on a team with zero expectations and throwing him the ball and saying, do something. You say, do that for 2 years, and now you say, oh, now blend in and fill in a team that has some actual aspirations. You literally had no culture, no discipline there. No players to instill the discipline. I don't see how he was set up to succeed in a situation like that. But now you say, okay, great. You got an actual point guard. You know, Alperen Şengün has ascended from being your 6th best scorer to your 3rd best scorer to now he's the guy. With Fred VanVleet and Jabari Smith's been better and Dylan Brooks going to get some time. Jalen Green, you kind of find your way in there. Oh, you're 21. Okay, you'll make it happen. So yeah, the struggles did happen because you're trying to figure out your role. You are trying to learn to take more efficient shots after taking basically any shot and being one of the few people to do that. And so, yeah, there's been some issues. Also, let's be real. Alperen Sengun played a different style of game than Jalen Green was accustomed to in the G League Ignite. In his first 2 years in Houston, success or not, this is how he played. So you have a totally different balance there. Now you take in, I don't want to say Alperen Sengun leaving is what set Jalen Green off, because they're already playing better they had a few games of where they were both, simpatico, where they were both playing well. But Alperen Sengun is gone. You move Amen Thompson in there. You go to a smaller, quicker, faster lineup that pushes in transition, capitalizes on mistakes. You have a defense by Udoka that's going to actually stand for something and try to force turnovers, which Jalen Green can cash in on the open floor. His three-point shot is going. Like, it looks great, right? Since March, and this is something important, since March, he's averaged 28.5 points per game. That's fourth in the league. Only Luka, Giannis, and Jason Tatum have done more. He's ahead of guys like SGA, the people's champ, right? Kevin Durant, and everyone's great Nikola Jokic, right? He's done this on 50% shooting with a 63% true shooting percentage. He is playing with confidence we have not seen. Like, we know that he's been able to score the ball. He averaged 21 points per game last season. But then the difference between being a volume scorer on a team, which he's been, near the bottom of the standings, and being the man on a team right now that is the hottest team in the NBA going toward the postseason. And so if you want to call it a stretch, if you want to call it it's not him winning meaningless games in April. It's him winning meaningful games as the main guy for a team that is actively chasing a postseason spot and saying, do it. And he is. So in my mind, if you want to call it a streak, it's a hell of a streak. Like, it's amazing, right? If you want to call it him becoming the player that I thought he was going to be, you could think that too. I'm not going to lie. As someone who is super, super optimistic on Jalen Green, I'm going to say somewhere in the middle. I am. Maybe defense is focused more on him. Maybe Alperen Sengun comes back, and the team alters their play style, and he has to kind of figure out how to play a little bit slower and pick his spots a little bit more. But right now, he has unbridled confidence and unbridled freedom. I don't know. But what I do know right now is I think if you see something like this as possible with him at every night, especially now being the focal point and getting the defense and still being able to drop numbers like he's been able to drop, I think you have to strongly consider making that investment. And listen, it might be a little early, and that's always the price you take when you go with guys. He's not a bona fide, dotted line immediately. Like, Jalen Green's not been that. My argument mainly is that how much of that is him and how much that situation he's been in that has led to the uneven at best play that we've seen from him. And now I rest my case.
Yeah, we'll toss it over to Stephen A now. Oh wait, I forgot we're not on first take. Josh, you're
Wow.
Now, Steven Silas is a close personal friend of mine. I love him like a brother, but the man cannot coach. I just had to say that, Corbin. I was dying. You dropped it like 3 times where you're like, great man. Wonderful human being. He kisses puppies and donates to charity. But the man should be shot if he steps on the sideline. I know that wasn't your intent. That wasn't your intent, but it was just hilarious. And then the other thing I have to say is you make a lot of great points. I don't disagree with the majority of those points.
Thank you.
Where we disagree is just in how much we're comfortable weighing this stretch as like the decision factor point versus the previous 2.5 seasons. That's where we differ. Otherwise, everything you said, minus the Stephen A. Smith stuff and the Jokic dig, don't think I didn't notice that. And Corban totally, I guarantee you guys, on Basketball GM right now, if Corban started a game as the Nuggets, which he never would because he doesn't like Nikola Jokic, I bet you Corban would trade Nikola Jokic for Jalen Green.
Listen,
because
I'm not
passing
going to
isn't as
confirm
fun
or
as
deny
scoring.
that. I'm not going to confirm or deny that. But what I am going to say is yes. No.
That's also just Corbin's thing when he plays Basketball GM is, can I take this Hall of Famer and trade him and then see what I can do?
It's the ultimate team building challenge. deconstructing the team and trying to build
by trading the one Hall of Famer you have on your team, trade him and then see what you can do. Which I respect it. I wouldn't do it personally, but I respect it. But yes, excellent Stephen A. Smith impression, Corban, and you made a bunch of, in fact, all your points about Jalen Green are accurate. I completely agree with all your points. I think, again, we just differ on how much we weigh this stretch versus the previous stretch of his career.
And that's fair. For sure. I appreciate that.
And also, I would venture to guess that even prior to this stretch, I would guess that Corban thought more highly of Jalen Green than Josh, just as a player as well.
Most definitely.
Yes.
I guess it's our way.
So yeah, that's what makes this, this offseason so interesting, because these choices are going to be fascinating. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are members of that front office, one that more aligns with Josh and one that more aligns with Corban's side of thinking, and one that says, yeah, we should, what Jalen Green is doing right now, this is something where we should lock him in and figure out how to build around him and the men and what they've done, versus, the other side might be thinking, well, no, like what we saw with Van Fleet and with Şengün and that duo and that sort of methodical game, that's more likely to be what helps us succeed here moving forward. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of right in the middle of you two. I like both of them. And I also agree that with Josh in terms of, like, I think from what we've seen, Şengün has shown more to this point. But I would also argue that, like, I also see where Corban is saying, like, I probably agree that Jalen Green's ceiling potential might be higher than Şengün, given his athletic abilities and, again, what we've seen in this stretch. What Green did at that end of that OKC game was just phenomenal. Splitting doubles, hitting step back threes. It's really impressive stuff. Let's talk about a few of the other guys on this young core. One guy we haven't really brought up at all is Jabari Smith Jr. And he's a guy that I think, has sort of tried to fit in both versions of this Rockets team. And he's a little bit more of a, when I talked about that a lot of these players on the Rockets have these polarizing strengths and weaknesses, I feel like Jabari Smith is not really like that. He's more of a guy that seems like he's going to be a pretty solid, versatile defender. And on the offensive end, can just be a guy that spots up off the ball and does things that just complement your star players. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on Jabari Smith Jr. and how he's fit with both of these versions, where he was more a power forward with when Şengün was playing, and now he's played a little bit more at the center spot during this recent stretch?
So I think Jabari Smith, like you said, is just trying to find his way, right? He comes in as a guy who, when he came into the NBA, could knock down the three at a high level, had some defensive attributes that maybe project him being more of a switchable defender, and really was trying to find some on-ball creation. Not even on-ball creation like setting up others, really just setting up shots for himself, because outside of being like a really dead-eye shooter from the college three-point line, there wasn't a lot of him, doing anything outside of like dribble pull-ups and side steps and things of that nature just to get to the jump shot. That was his weapon. Finishing at the rim wasn't great. Creating off the dribble, what was that? Like, those were the issues for him, right? When he came to the NBA, unfortunately, like, those were still issues. And also he found that the NBA three-point line and the college three-point line are two different lines, right? And he shot just 30% from three. And that was his main weapon, right? He took under 5 of a game, which is under 5 of his 12 shot attempts a game last season. This season, in a different role, right? One, he definitely got a lot more, and I don't want to say a lot more opportunities, because he's only taking one less shot per game now than he was then. But I think his role in the temporary pecking order of the team is shifted. Now I think he's able to take more high percentage shots because that's the shots he's going to be given. You know what I mean? Like, there is more of a role. You have a guy in Fred VanVleet who not only is a proper point guard, but also assumes a high amount of usage himself. Alperen Sengun, being the playmaking bit that he is, I'm sorry, a lot is going through him now. There's a lot of usage also going through him. Don't forget a guy like Jalen Green, who we already mentioned, that's been up and down, but throughout this consistently has gotten some level of usage. So you're trying to find a way for Jabari to fit in. I think one thing I can say is he's definitely been more aggressive and assertive in spots. I think he's finding ways to be more impactful in that way. He's shooting the three ball a lot better, went from 30% to 35%, taking roughly the same amount of threes. He has gone between power forward and center, kind of different lineups with different interpretations of the roster, depending on who's available. Not interpretations, I mean iterations. So you are seeing a guy, again, I think he's similar to Jalen Green, and this is trying to find where he fits. I don't think he immediately comes in with the weapons to be a positive contributor more than he is right now, because some of that stuff, the defensive potential has to be more realized. It has come into play this season, but there needs to be more of that, right? Offensively, he does need to do some of the things he hasn't done. He shot the three ball better, and he's actually done some things off the dribble here and there now, but that needs to be more consistent. That's not something that he does with regularity. So I think for him, a very solid, intriguing player right now. If he's a solid stretch big with some defensive versatility, 3 through 5, that's great. Obviously, the hope is that there's more, right? But if he's just that, I'm not mad at that. But I do think that it has been a situation of him, just trying to find his place. Even with that, he was on the all-rookie team last season. So it's not like he's been a bust, It's unfortunate you're in a draft class that had, Paulo Banchero ball out and now Chet Holmgren balling out. But, very solid player. I still think I would have taken him top 5 in his draft class. Off the top of my head, I got to remember that draft class. But looking at that, I see a guy he's not even 21 yet. He's still 20. He'll be 21 in May. And I think a guy being 21 May, being an active contributor in a spot where he is the starting big for a team with playoff aspirations this season, coming off of a team that had no hope of it last season, isn't bad.
All valid points that Corban makes. I will say Corban kind of mentioned that the usage has been kind of weird for Jabari. He's currently 11th on the Rockets in usage. 11th.
There you go. Wow.
And he was a top 3 pick. And like Corban said, some of that is maybe expectations were a little outsized for what he would bring in his first couple of seasons. The idea was, well, he can be a 3-and-D guy right away, and then that gives him time to develop his off the dribble stuff and every other little thing we need for him to hit hard. And the problem is that the shot hasn't translated yet, really. And he is shooting better this season, but he's still around league average right now. And so, like Corban said, though, and this is, again, I think the defining characteristic about this Rockets core is all of these are very young players. They're very young players, and most of them, their first season or two was an atrocious context that was just no veteran oversight, no real accountability, no real structure. And therefore, how much can you develop without some structure, without some accountability, without some veteran guidance and stuff? And so is it fair to judge them all at this point? Probably not. But that's also your job as the Rockets front office, right? You have to judge them because you're in charge of building this team going forward. And if you're not, identifying, who do we need to build around going forward and who do we maybe not need, you're not doing your job right.
Yeah, and Josh mentioned at the outset he's not super high on this young core. I actually am relatively high on it, and not because there's one particular guy that I am uber confident is going to be special, but that I feel like this core has multiple outs at that player, right? Şengün has a small chance at that. We've already talked about what Jalen Green has shown lately. I think the player I'm highest on is Amen Thompson. And I still have no idea what he is exactly, especially given like if he never develops the shot, I do sort of wonder like how high he can get, but like his defense, his transition game, his ability to finish, um, there's a lot of really intriguing things there, right? And then you have all of these other guys. I know Josh said he was really high on Tari Eason, right? And Corban, of course, has been high on Jabari Smith Jr. And there's guys like Cam Whitmore. So in a way, I think it's really positive, and they can kind of draw this out and see what this looks like in a year or two, which guys develop, which guys don't, and kind of go from there. And like, if it's a scenario where all of these guys hit and it's like, well, you can't pay all of them, right? That to me is a good problem to have as an organization.
I will say, from a theoretical rebuild standpoint, the general idea is you let this process play out for another season or two, right? And then ideally one and hopefully more pop and turn into stars. Maybe this Jalen Green stretch is the new normal for him. Maybe Şengün and him can coexist, and like they both are what they've shown this season. And maybe Jabari Smith takes a leap. Like there's a lot you can like see the potential for, but I think the big thing is we've seen that both the ownership, the front office, and the coach are pushing hard for this team to make progress now. Not, in 2 more seasons, but now. That's why we heard that Jalen Green was offered in a trade package for Mikal Bridges. That's why they went after Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and Brook Lopez so hard in the offseason. Like, I don't think that this team is going to give these young, and we talked about the context, Corban's laid it out beautifully, like these young players that are just now experiencing like a competent NBA context. I don't think this organization is going to give them the extra season or two that you ideally would want to find out what you actually have with this core. So I feel like this core is probably going to get broken up before they, in most cases, would have been. Whether that's a good idea or not, I'm not sure.
So you say that even despite the fact that Jalen Green, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., all those guys are playing heavy minutes right now for a team that's won 11 in a row. Şengün is another part of that core that started the whole season up until his injury. To me, like, I agree with what you're saying, that they brought in Udoka and they definitely made moves this past offseason to sign veterans to get this team to be better now. But to me, from what I've seen this year, I think the timeline has actually been pretty good in that, like, fortunately, outside of Amen and Whitmore, they've had guys get the opportunities to get some run on some bad teams prior to the shift. And now you're seeing some of the fruit of their experience maybe playing out now. And I think Amen is so talented, and Whitmore too, frankly, that, it'll be hard even in a competitive environment to prevent them from getting time.
Yeah, and what I mean is that, at the trade deadline, for instance, they traded for Steven Adams, which some people just took as like, a salary type move. But really, that's, again, Steven Adams brings what they were trying to get with Brook Lopez. And also, they made that offer for Mikal Bridges. We've heard from multiple sources that they made that offer. So my point is not that the current streak doesn't count or anything, but let's also just be honest here. The current streak has them 2 games over 500 and fighting it out for the last spot in the play-in. So while it is a promising stretch, and everyone you mentioned have been playing well in a winning streak, and I'm not saying I necessarily agree or disagree on this, but like, do we think this front office and the pressure from Ime and probably the pressure from Dylan and Fred as well, to like win sooner, does that outweigh like, hey, Cam's been interesting, like Jabari's had his flashes, like, are we sure that they don't try to package some number of these guys together and some picks to get a big upgrade to add to whomever they are keeping? And that's what I think they'll probably do this offseason, or try to do this offseason. Now, whether that's the right move or not, we don't know yet, but that seems to be the indication that this front office is giving. Now, would we do something different? Maybe, and I'm sure that's something we'll get into in a little bit. But, I think there is internal pressure to, not just compete for the play-in, but like, let's get back into the playoffs. And hopefully this streak continues. They manage to get into the play-in. It'd be a fantastic story. It would provide a lot of, clarity on several of the players that they have. Like, it reduces the uncertainty on, should we offer Jalen Green an extension? Should we offer Şengün an extension? Should we do this? Should we do that? And ultimately the question is going to be, what decisions do they make this offseason, and how much of it is going to be influenced by this winning streak versus the overall season prior to this stretch.
Right. And I think like you're right that there were plenty of rumors about that they offered Green to the Nets. But yeah, I think that's where, and a lot of people were looking at the Nets and saying like, this is where maybe you screwed up by not accepting Green and multiple firsts for Bridges. Is that like, now with this new evidence, you would hope that the Rockets have at least shifted in their mindset a little bit on Jalen Green specifically, and even Amen, if they were contemplating trading him as well, to the idea that like, okay, well, yeah, we do want to make some trades that make us better, but now the players we're trading away have shown us more. So would trading them for these particular players actually make us a better team, or are we better suited? And will we accomplish the goals that we're trying to accomplish by just staying put?
I was just writing in the chat that like, maybe this is the type of thing that makes them pivot from considering moving Jalen to like, maybe we'll try to see what we can get for a package with Şengün or Jabari and picks, and see, if we can still get the type of player that we want to come in and complement Jalen and Amen and Cam. So that's what they do this offseason will tell us how they viewed this stretch and how they viewed this season overall, and where they're willing to pivot. Because like I said, I still firmly believe they're going to try to make a significant trade. They're going to try to get, at the very least, more veteran quality NBA play. Not saying that the players that they might trade away are bad NBA players, but just they might prefer, for a stronger push for the playoffs, a more veteran player who can provide similar production or more.
Yeah, I guess my question, I like the way this conversation is going, where it's going here. Let's say you were to move a guy like Alperen Şengün. My question would be, who would you target in return? We don't have to name actual players. If we do, fine. But like, in terms of an archetype of player, right? You look at the contract for a guy like Fred VanVleet, right? Who is 30 now. I think he runs 2 more years, is really, a team friendly and a player friendly contract for both, right? But when that expires, maybe you bring him back. Do you focus on a point guard? Again, depends on how Jalen Green goes. If it's more of a flash in the pan, maybe you do have to look at another shooting guard. If it's something that's really sustainable, maybe you're locked there. What would you prioritize, both of you? I'm curious, in a move, archetype player, whatever, if you were to move one of Şengün or Jabari?
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be to go after the most valuable position in basketball. It's easier said than done, but go after a wing would be what I would try to do. I do think that Jabari Smith Jr. has shown some flashes as like a small ball 5, and it makes sense, right? He's tall, he's long, he can shoot it at least for average from downtown, and at the 5 spot, that's more valuable than shooting average from 3 at the 4, right? But if you say move him to the 5 and Steven Adams is your backup center, right? You need someone to fill in at those 3 and 4 spots, and you need depth, even despite having the likes of Cam Whitmore and Tari Eason and those types of players. So yeah, that's what I would go for. And also, not only because you do still have VanVleet for those couple of years, as Corban stated, but I also believe in Amen Thompson as like a point forward type, right? Where he can handle the basketball and do some point guard things on the offensive end, while also providing that really good versatility on the defensive end and also on the glass.
Yeah, honestly, I think they probably still call up Brooklyn and ask for Mikal again. Like they might be like, hey, look, like you had your chance at Jalen. You didn't seem to like him then, so we're going to keep him. But how do you feel about Şengün, especially since Claxton is going to be a free agent? I feel like Garrett said, they're probably going to be looking for a veteran wing, particularly one who can play strong defense and ideally complement the players that they do keep. So probably somebody who can shoot really well, play strong defense, veteran. Only guy that really comes to mind, considering OG's no longer likely available, is probably Mikal. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to open that back up. But also, as we'll probably discuss in another podcast about the Brooklyn Nets at some point, I'm not sure that Brooklyn is even interested in moving Mikal anyway. So I'm not sure who it would be for necessarily, but considering that, if you're talking about potentially moving Şengün or Jabari, both of whom have had really positive stretches as your center, and your current other centers on the team are Jock Landale and an injured Steven Adams, maybe you look at center. Maybe you look at a center that can play in the type of up-tempo system that has worked well for them during this stretch and can complement Amen and Jalen.
Well, and I'll just mention too that they could pursue a more mid-level trade, like not go for a star like Bridges. I mean, there's a couple other guys in Brooklyn, what about a Dorian Finney-Smith, something like that. I think there's some other options out there for him where, you might not have to send as much back, right, to get somebody like that, while still doing what Josh mentioned, bringing in some more veteran guys that maybe you feel like provide a little bit more of that consistency.
I think those are both nuanced and interesting answers. I was curious because you're right. Like, it really kind of depends on how these players kind of develop, which again goes back to the main crux of our discussion about the core, right, of the squad and what exactly that is. And so I guess, it's funny. We've kind of gone, and again, I want to get your thoughts on this. I know we're kind of bouncing around here. Are we good with the coaching? Because I know I mentioned my good friend Steven Silas, and I know we talked about Ime Udoka. We touched on him, but looking at it, just like we did when we talked about the Hawks, which we kind of went over pretty quickly because we all agree that Quinn Snyder's a really good coach, right? And the Hornets, who Steve Clifford's a good coach, but whether or not he's a good fit for this team. How do we feel about Ime's fit with this roster from a long-term? Sorry, Josh in the back cracking me up, man. How do we feel about Ime Udoka's long-term fit with this team and what you've seen so far from him from a coaching perspective? Are you impressed? Are there things that you are curious about? Just want to talk about that for a second.
I mean, I think it's safe to say none of us are a fan of Ime in terms of his personal conduct, not only in in the basketball setting, but off the court as well. He doesn't seem like a good guy. So pushing that aside, which, I don't want to do, but if you're just focused on the basketball portion of it, his track record as a head coach is really strong. He's been an excellent coach. He did extremely well in his year in Boston, getting them to the finals. And then to turn this team around in this substantial way, especially on the defensive end, with how many young guys were playing consistent minutes, even with the veteran additions of Brooks and Van Fleet, it's a phenomenal coaching job. I really think he's done terrific there. And then also, again, with this stretch, since Şengün's been out, this team's been a top 5 offense. So, the way he's been able to get this team to switch up their style a little bit, given that, the slowest guy on their roster is now out, we can speed things up, play more in transition, and play that way. Yeah, I think he's been fantastic, even though, I don't think he should have ever been hired there in the first place.
Took the words right out of my mouth. You're muted, Corban.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say no further comment. I wasn't expecting to talk so soon.
Sorry for putting you on the spot. but yeah, no, like Garrett said, this season hasn't obviously lived up to his year with the Celtics, but also it's a much younger team coming from a much more atrocious context versus what he took up with the Celtics in his first season as head coach. I think he's done a good job this season, but I also agree that he should not have been hired there in the first place.
Yeah, it's so weird because these types of things where it's no, is that a good thing to do? Is that a good person thing to do? No. Does that disqualify you from being a coach? In my mind, I thought there were better candidates. I'm not going to say whether or not it should or shouldn't because I feel like that's just scummy. I don't know. I feel there's a line between criminal activity and just scummy behavior. And it's not a Miles Bridges situation where that's criminal. This is just, no, that's not cool, dog. That's messed up in a variety of ways. But does that make you not fit to be a coach? I don't know. It depends on when your bar is. For me, it really comes down to I'm a little more pragmatic. Is it worth it? Is the backlash of signing a guy with questionable personal issues worth the media attention and backlash you would have gotten? I will say, Houston took the gamble, and so far it's paid off for Houston, right? They were able to withstand, and trust me, that horrible, in my mind, justification for why they hired him, but they were able to withstand the early PR disaster of doing that. And obviously, with the way they've been playing, it doesn't look bad for Ime Udoka. So when you look at it and all of that, it's not the worst thing. As far as his coaching, I don't know. I haven't actually watched him enough to really give a good way one way or the other. I've watched a few Rockets games, but in my terms of rotations, things like that, his defensive principles have obviously carried over. But I think any coach probably that had defensive, acumen, again, no disrespect to the Rockets former coach Stephen Silas, but that's not what he was about, right? I don't know what he was about, but that wasn't what he was about. So when you go to a guy
Corban,
like
Corban, if I can interject here, prior
Absolutely.
to this season, I don't think there were too many people that were suggesting that Alperen Şengün was some great defensive anchor, right? And
True.
now, they've been a top 5 defense basically all season long. And yes, they brought in a good backcourt defensively in Van Fleet and Brooks.
Yes,
but
they did.
Most of the rest of the roster was unproven defensively.
And that's very true. I mean, Jeff Green too. As old as he is, he can still defend when he's not being posterized. I'm just kidding. But no, to your point, Garrett, I don't know if you saw that dunk recently. Yeah, sorry. Who dunked
Why
on
are you
him? It was
on an elder?
I'm sorry. I hated to do it, but boy, oh boy, Wiggins. Well, not Andrew Wiggins. The Thunder Wiggins, Aaron Wiggins. Jeez. I think it was him who did that. I can't remember. I probably shouldn't have said that not knowing. Anyways, moving right along to that. You're right. Like that is it was Aaron Wiggins. Okay, I just had to make sure. Actually, okay, whatever. This is not good radio. Going back to what I was saying. You're right. You make a good point, Garrett. Like, no, Alperen Sengun was a turnstile defensively, right? And to him being, he's still not a great defender, but he's in a scheme right now where he's able to stand out and be really, really decent there. And I think a lot of that is you have smarter, capable defenders who have been on different teams that know how to actually play defense that make it tough. You have a Dylan Brooks hounding your opposing when last year that was what? Kevin Porter? You know what I mean? Like you have, guys that are really getting into people. Again, Fred VanVleet, where last year you had who knows? You know what I mean? Like there's different personnel, but also the coaching does come into play. And you're right. Like him or not, he has instilled a defensive principle that was foreign to the Rockets. I mean, you could even say before this, I wouldn't say they were great defensive teams, even when they were a good basketball team. They were better defensive teams, but they weren't great defensive teams, even when they were in the James Harden heydays. They were adequate to good. And now they're elite. And a lot of that, I mean, to a certain extent, does have to go to coaching as well. So I will give some credit to him for that. And also, I mean, aside from him, again, the scumminess, like, I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be the coach long-term for this team. So I just thought it was interesting because we have made it a little bit of a staple here on our Operation Rebuilds to discuss the coaching in some capacity. We obviously won't spend as much time on, we've already spent more time on Ime than we did on Quinn Snyder, but Quinn Snyder was a good coach with no skeletons in the closet that we know of. So it was pretty easy to cover him.
Yeah. And, the coaching is one of those things where, especially again, Stephen Silas, great guy. When you're going from a probably the 30th ranked coach in the NBA to someone that is, above average, that jump is very significant, right? And then not only that, but the fact that they went from, as Corbin said, Kevin Porter Jr., their backcourt was a disaster last season. And just bringing in, and I would argue VanVleet and Brooks are more than competent, but just bringing in competency at positions that you completely lacked it prior to makes such a massive difference. And that's been a huge part of why this Rockets team has had this resurgence. And you also, like, when we're talking about a rebuild and making sure that the culture is in a good place where the players can actually develop, having the coach that they have now and VanVleet and Brooks there, I think they've made a big impact on a player like Jalen Green to commit to playing defense, right? He has actually, I think that's one of the strides, even prior to this recent stretch, that was one of the big strides he made this season of going from being just a ghastly defensive player to what I would argue is just below average now, right? And that's a huge jump. And a lot of that is just having those veterans lead by way of example and having a coach that is basically saying, you've got to do this or you're not going to play.
Thoughts, Josh?
You just did that because you didn't want to talk.
Don't do that to me.
I can tell.
Don't do that to me. I thought you were going to go
anyone listening, these two have been doing more commentary in the group chat than they've actually spoken words in this discussion.
Hey, we've had
Garrett,
long diatribes about Jalen Green.
And I just come off the flu. It's my flu game, Garrett.
Yeah, it's Corbin's flu game.
Defending Jalen Green.
To Stephen A. Smith. But no, like, I think he has made an improvement defensively, and I think honestly it's the defensive improvement of the team overall that I think is the most impressive thing this season. And I think a lot of that does go to VanVleet, Brooks, and Ime all kind of setting that structure and that defensive mindedness in the locker room, during practice, during blanking on the name, but during any moments where they're working on team strategy for upcoming opponents or doing film study or anything, I guarantee all three of those guys are constantly hammering home the importance of defense. And the fact that there has been this improvement is impressive as is. Again, the question becomes, how patient is this front office, this ownership group, and Ime? Do they let this young core continue to develop one more season? Or do they try to take a big swing in the offseason, either at the draft or after? And I think that'll be the real telling point about this organization and what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, yeah, and Josh, you brought up that, like, despite this recent run, there's still only 2 games over 500. They're still, if the season ended today, not in the play-in. But at the same time, when you consider where this team was a year ago, they won 22 games in the 22-23 season. And now they're most likely going to win 20 more games than that this year. If they end up around 500. So a 20-game improvement, plus, the young guys have gotten a decent amount of run this year. To me, that's a huge success. Now, there is a question over, does the front office and ownership consider it a success? And if they don't, for whatever reason, then yes, you might see them, as Josh said, not necessarily saying that making a win now trade is necessarily going to be bad for them, but you also don't want to make a win now trade for the wrong reasons, that we're trying to push the agenda faster than it needs to actually go instead of just taking the necessary steps. Because in my mind, again, looking at how they're doing this year compared to last year, they've taken a huge step in the right direction, and they should, hopefully take another step next year. But yeah, Corban, what are your thoughts on that? Do you imagine this front office, say they miss the play-in or, get in the play-in but don't make the playoffs? Would this front office and ownership consider this year a success given the improvements they've made? Or are they just looking at it well, we brought in Ime, we brought in these guys, it's playoffs or bust. Let's make all of these, really real win now moves and try to push this forward at hyper speed?
I think it's an interesting question, Garrett, for sure. And I don't know, I almost want to hear Josh's thoughts on it, but if I have to press mine first, I will say that I think it's one that requires some nuance, right? Because if you look at where they started, I mean, the fact that the Rockets right now are on this crazy 11-game winning streak and still just outside the play-in, one speaks to the quality of talent in the West, but two speaks to just how bad the Rockets were up to this point. Or not even bad, I would say disjointed, right? Because that's what they were, right? So I think that you do have to afford yourself some grace there, right? You do have to afford yourself some grace knowing that you have 2 of the main cogs or potentially main cogs coming up for rookie extensions. And what does that look like, right? You have to look at the deals you made for these players, Dylan Brooks and, Fred VanVleet, as they age into their 30s and mid-30s, what that looks like. And so I think you give yourself one more year. I think whether or not they make the playoffs right now, whether or not they make the play-ins or whether or not they make the playoffs right now, this is a good stepping stone for the Rockets to at least give another year, and not even a whole year. Let's go next year to the trade deadline and see what happens. I think that's a good barometer of taking this team, another training camp, another year of internal improvement from your development guys, seeing what that looks like for an Amen Thompson, right? For Atari Easton, can we get him healthy again? Let's see what Jabari Smith Jr. looks like. Let's see if Jalen Green can build on what he already has started, right? Let's see Alperen Sengun. Can he continue to diversify his game, right? Be the same offensive cog he's been, improve defensively, maybe actually be able to shoot some jump shots into threes, right? There's some things that these guys can do that you can kind of contextualize their internal improvement along with the hopefully sustained play of their older vets and see what that looks like. And come the trade deadline, time to really kind of reassess and look, okay, if this isn't working, we sell. we try and make the moves. If anything, I think that they protect themselves from themselves in the sense of, instead of trading Jalen Green and having him maybe possibly put these flashes on the Brooklyn Nets team and having all the dialogue going, oh wow, what did the Rockets do giving up early, yada 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 yada. They have a scenario where they have this young guy who's having such sustained flashes. Well, a flash, he's definitely the player of the month for this month. You can at least say that, and you can say, okay, now can we build on that? Right? We'll have our piece for the future playing like this right now. Is he actually somebody we can have moving forward? And the same goes down the line. So in my mind, it's interesting. It's some nuance there for sure. I would honestly give it until about midway through next year, and then I would make a call once and for all if we're going to continue going down this path, or if it's time to change it up and kind of realign the iteration of this unit.
So yeah, Josh, I'll ask you sort of the same question. Like, A, would you deem what they've done this year a success? And then B, do you think the front office ownership feels the same way?
A, yes, it's an unqualified success. Like it's clearly a success. Now I think the front office and ownership and Ime probably view it as a success, but not to the same degree as they probably should. The other thing to take in consideration, and I typically agree with Corban actually on a lot of the discussion this podcast, which is funny because we decided to do the Houston Rockets because Corban and I differ so greatly on Jalen Green. But I think you do want to give this to the next trade deadline and see, like, can we play Şengün and Jalen together and Amin and like maximize all three? Is there a way where we can do that? Because if you can, that changes the calculus when it comes to extending Şengün or Jalen, or just signing them once their contracts expired to like bigger deals. But the flip side is, from a trade partner perspective, it's more interesting if you offer Jalen or Şengün around the draft while there's still time to extend them. That becomes a much more interesting trade proposition for other teams, where not only can we trade for these guys, but we can then lock them in for X number of years. So with their bird rights too, like we can have like the best advantage in doing that. So I think it was a clear success. I feel like the decision makers will feel like it was a success, but not what they want. And I feel like they're still going to try to make a big swing this offseason.
We had Josh posed this in the chat, but I think a good next question would be, how should we handle the off season? And it seems like Corban's shaking his head like he doesn't want to field this question first. So we'll go to Josh first.
Saving my throat.
Yeah, we'll go to Josh first, and then over to Corban.
Well, I mean, to kind of piggyback off of Corban, I feel like Corban and I have been talking a lot, Garrett. What would you do?
Yeah, so my stance, as I mentioned when you guys were having the Şengün Green debate, is I kind of like both of them. So my stance would be, if you can get those guys on contracts that you feel comfortable with, I would look to extend both of them this offseason. Now, there would definitely be a number for both of them that I probably would not be comfortable giving. And if that's what they require, then I would move into the season and let it play out. But if I can get both of those guys at a number that I feel good with, then yeah, I absolutely would extend both of them.
I definitely like where you're going. I think for me, this is one of those things where For Jalen Green, yeah, you bring him in, right? Like, I think you extend him. I think you try to see where this goes. If it's Alperen Sengun, it's a little more complicated for me. I don't know. I feel like I need to see more. Like, you've done a good, like, I don't know.
So so Corban, it's frankly a little hypocritical that you don't need to see more from Jalen Green, who, as Josh stated earlier, it's only been 6% of his career that this recent flash.
6% of his career.
Yeah.
Hey, don't jump on me now. Okay, listen.
And Sengun has been good for the last year and a half.
Well, again, it's been good.
So why is a 11 to 15 game sample enough and a year and a half game sample not enough?
I think it's a classic good stats, bad team guy. I think Alperen Sengun is that person for me. What Jalen Green is doing right now is on impactful winning games. What Alperen Sengun was doing was good. I mean, they weren't chasing the 10th seed like they are around Green right now. They were getting a spot on NBA today, which is great. Like, look at the play of Alperen Sengun while the Rockets sit at 12th, right? Now, look at the play of Jalen Green as the Rockets have won 11 straight. Look at the impact that he's made on this team. Excuse my throat is just getting so hoarse. Like, look at the impact he's had on an actual winning team. I think last year you look at it, great numbers. Look where the Rockets were last season. They were throwing to Jalen Green, and I'm sorry, you're a big man who put the ball in the basket. Your defense was horrible. I think, if anything, Alperen Sengun has benefited from the team structure around him right now, where he has a coach, defensive-minded, that likes playing through a big. You have good defenders that make up for your lack of defensive skills, right? And you're in a situation where you can ball out offensively and do what you want. And even that wasn't doing it. They didn't go on this impactful winning streak until after he went down. They were playing well together before he went down, but they've actually made impactful moves around Jalen Green. I think that is a sign. I think if you're the Rockets front office, you look into that and you go, interesting. That's my thoughts.
Corban, you said yourself, like, when they were focused on Sengun, they were the 12th seed, and that, like, Jalen Green being focused
once
around
they focus on Jalen Green, look where they are.
Hold on. Yeah, the fighting for the 10th seed. They're currently 11th.
At least they're fighting for something.
Corban, they moved up one seed. I don't think
because the West is so tough. They've won 11 straight. That was not done with Sengun.
Okay, Corban. So the West is so tough.
Yes.
And that's why they're stuck in the 11th seed, despite being based around Jalen Green and the impact he's having. And yet, when they were based around Sengun, the West wasn't tough. And they were in the 12th seed, one seed lower. Like, I get where you're coming from, because I know you prefer the play type of Jalen Green over the play type of Alperen Sengun. But there is a lot of hypocrisy in your statements right now, man. And Corbin's left the call. It's true.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And I think the other thing that maybe Corban isn't maybe factoring in enough here is that if you extend Sengun, I think there's frankly more of a likelihood that he's a tradable contract than Jalen Green. You could say that Jalen Green has a higher potential than Sengun, but I also think Jalen Green has a lower floor than Sengun. So that's where I think I would say extending Sengun is actually the safe thing for the Rockets. Extending Green is a bit more of a risk, even though, yes, it could pay huge dividends.
I'm just so sick right now. 1 second. Let's go to Josh. We'll go back to me.
So Garrett probably has some correct take in the sense that, like, either of these guys being extended will probably be tradable. But the issue, and this is also one area where I differ from most people that I talk to in basketball, I never bet on trades being possible because trades are ridiculously hard to pull off. And if your strategy is, well, we can always trade them later, that's a tough strategy, in my opinion, to actually pull off. Now, you could, it's possible, but I wouldn't bet on it. That said, I think the most optimistic strategy that you can take is try to get some additional veteran like defensive minded guys in the offseason, whether that's through free agency or a smaller trade for like Dorian Finney-Smith, like you said, Garrett. And then see if you can see what you have with the pairing of Jalen Green and Şengün, and see if you can play this up-tempo style. And then when you do get like transitioned into a half-court possession, that's when you flow through Şengün. Like, I don't think it necessarily has to be either or. You can, in theory at least, try to do both. And like Garrett said, like, you do have until the trade deadline or the next offseason. And like I mentioned earlier, even if you don't extend these guys before that point, like, you have their restricted free agent rights. You can match any offer sheet they sign. And Corban suggested that it does potentially damage the relationship with the player, which could lead to a trade request down the line. But like, from a financial standpoint, and from a trying to see what you really have, it makes the most sense to roll this into the next season and at least see how you start that season off with an ideally healthy Şengün, Jalen Green, ideally finishing out the season playing this way, and see what you have with that group.
Yeah, so couple points. First off, this is more of a question, but like, are we sure you can extend a guy on a rookie contract into their fourth season, or is the deadline prior to their fourth season?
I think it's somewhere in, I want to say October. I believe it's somewhere in October that like,
yeah,
you can,
so you
set
can't.
Yes, but like I said, you can play it like, honestly, it plays to both of the players' strengths too, where if you say like, hey, here's what we could offer just based on the last 3 years, taking all that into consideration, here's what we could offer, but we know that you this last season you've played much better, and so we want to see how all the pieces fit together this season. And in the process, if you continue to play the way that you did last season, we're going to up the offer that we're willing to give you. And like, again, there are trade-offs to that where you might damage a relationship a little bit, but you're also more protected, not just from maybe this Şengün not playing to the same level he has this season, or Jalen Green not playing to the same level he has for the stretch. Also, you're protected if either of those guys like suffer an injury in a preseason game or something like that. And now you're no longer like the guys that just signed him to a near max 4-year, 5-year extension and he's already injured. So from a lot of different avenues and opportunity perspectives, like, the safest thing for the team is actually to let's play this out at least at the start of next season up to the trade deadline, see what we have, see who we really are, and then go from there.
Well, and
Now,
that's where I wanted to.
Yeah.
That's where I wanted to clarify, though, that in terms of actually signing an extension, they
You
have
have
up until the
yeah.
start of next year. So they can't wait to the trade deadline and then say we're going to extend you now.
No, I don't
once you wait to the trade deadline, you've got to wait for the rest of the season. And
but yes, they would still have all the leverage, though. Like, they would still be able to offer more than any other team would be able to offer. They'd still be able to match whatever any other team offered. So, like, from the team perspective, and it sounds a little callous, but it's true, but from the team perspective, like, that's the best case scenario. And I mentioned it earlier. Let's say both of those players get max offer sheets. If you're willing to match those offer sheets, that's actually cheaper for you than if you offered them max deals yourself.
Right, but then there's also the Jalen Brunson situation, right, where the Mavs had an opportunity to sign him to, I think it was like a 4-year, $55 million extension. They didn't. He played out the season, played extremely well, and then got a huge contract from the New York Knicks.
Very
So-
possible.
Very good point.
Very
so
possible.
that's where, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and there are a lot of, you are mitigating some risks with your strategy, but that is the risk of what you're suggesting, is that Jalen Green or Şengün play so well the year after you choose to not sign that extension, and then they get the boat of money.
I would say two things to that. First off, do you really think after this stretch, after the excitement that it's caused in fans like Corban and other people, like, you think Jalen Green's agent isn't going to push for a lot of money? You think Alperen Şengün's agent isn't going to push for a lot of money after the season he just had, where he was getting most improved player attention? Like, both of those like, you're not getting a Jalen Brunson 4 years, $55 million like extension here with either of these guys. It's not going to happen. And then the other thing I would say is, if they are playing so well that they're then worth max money on the market, that's a good thing for you. That's a good thing for you. And yes, you might have been able to get them for a slightly lesser price point, but you would have had to do that before you were more certain that they were worth it.
Right. Yeah. No, all great points. And yeah, I largely agree. I largely agree with your stance. And that's where, again, going back to my comment about like, I'm never suggesting you sign a player with the intention of trading them. My thought was just that if you can sign them to a contract that you as a team feel good about keeping them on, and you happen to figure out after you've signed that deal that, oh, this isn't a great fit, or they haven't lived up to the same level that we were hoping they would live up to, and then you got a trade offer down the line. If you sign them to a decent deal initially, that contract is likely to be tradable. That's all I was saying earlier. But yeah, Corban, did you have any thoughts on this discussion?
Not really as much. I think you both kind of brought the pros and cons to it in a way that I have nothing of like outside of agreeing with one or the other to add. I just think that you're right. There is nuance as to when, and timing is important, right? I mean, you look at the timing of a lot of seismic trades and moves that happen that's happened in the NBA, and literally a little bit here, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, and the move might not have happened or been demonstrably different than what it was, right? And so I think that's an important element. Of course, that's not this big old revelation here, like newsflash, timing's important, but also like when you come to a young team like this, it is, right? And so I think you want to get as much, in my opinion, you want to get as much time as you can with these guys before you make a move, especially given the situation that both came in. Because I made the big argument for Jalen Green, and yes, I thought he had more responsibility than a guy like Alperen Şengün based off first off of draft order and the expectations that came with that, and also just the way he was kind of treated, or the way that he was kind of slotted in a role where he was asked to do a lot. I gave more credence to Jalen Green than I did to Alperen Şengün. But if we're being realistic, both were in the exact same position, right? Like on a team that didn't really know what they were doing and didn't put them in the best situation with which to succeed. So at the end of the day, that kind of gives you an even. How much of that is their relative failure to develop or failure to launch, as it were, compared to you were in a rough situation where you couldn't even get that done, where you had to learn bad habits and have to unlearn those bad habits to then be a productive NBA player, right? And again, that's nuance. That takes time. So I think that they need to take all the time that they have at their disposal to really evaluate and make an educated guess, or not educated guess, but an educated decision, basically a guess, as to which player, combination of players, etc., are most beneficial for this Rockets team moving forward. I think that's my only real addition to this conversation, is that when it comes to timing, take your time.
Yeah, very, very well said. We should probably start wrapping this up. We've already been recording for over an hour and a half. I guess.
Well, we do.
Were there any players or topics or anything else about the Rockets that either of you wanted to bring up before we finish this up here?
I do just want to say I think Tari Eason doesn't get enough love in general because he's not somebody who's scoring a lot, but he's one of the best already at his age. Like possession creators, whether that's from rebounding, creating steals, blocking shots. Like he's a disruptor at a high level, and those players tend to be beneficial. And while I wouldn't say Tari is somebody you're deathly afraid of from three, so far he is shooting above league average from three. So like this season. So he's somebody that I think doesn't get discussed enough when it comes to this young core because he's the perfect type of complement you would want either for Şengün or Jalen. And so like I just want to give him some love.
Yeah, he's a really interesting guy. Like he both provides, some additional secondary rim protection along with like a guy like Jabari. And yeah, he's got really long arms. He's active. He is good at getting into the passing lanes. And yeah, like when I watched him in college, I think the issue I had with him a lot was, and part of it could have been just the coaching and the style of play where they played a lot of zone, but it felt like he was just kind of oftentimes kind of meandering and not putting in full effort at all times. But like the skill and the talent was very evident right away. And he's the perfect type of player to me that was worth, a middle of the first round sort of selection where it's like he showed plenty of flashes. And it's just a matter of like generating that consistency, which, again, a lot of young players struggle with that the consistency part of the game.
I just want to take a moment to shout back out Jalen Green. No, I'm just kidding. I definitely think this was a fun conversation for sure. As far as players I'm looking at, I really want to see Jabari Smith Jr. break out. I want to see next year what this looks like for him in his third season. Does he have a season similar to what Jalen Green did at the end of the year, at the beginning of the year? Does he finally figure it out? What does figuring out for Jabari Smith Jr. even look like? Like that's something I'm definitely going to be looking at moving forward. Also, Cam Whitmore, like. Guy has some offensive flashes for real, right? Defensively, there's some things there, but for a 6'7" body to have the power and the frame that he does, to have the touch from deep that he does, offensively, the potential is there. He's been on my board for a while. He'll probably miss the rest of the season. At least he's expected to miss the next 3 weeks with a knee sprain. Well, next 2 weeks now when this is announced from the Rockets. So we'll see what that looks like if the Rockets are in the play-in, whatever happens there. But at the end of the day, for someone in 38 games, just 38 games and 17 minutes a night to give you 12 points on pretty efficient shooting from the field and from three as a rookie, pretty good. And this is also for a guy who did slip. Again, he was picked in the 20th overall for reasons that are still unclear. I'm still very mad my Lakers did not select him. But at the end of the day, that's a player I want to see what the ideal outcome for him looks like. He's basically the alternate version of Tari Eason for me. I'm very high on him. He does the one thing I look forward to in scoring is the other stuff that I'm not really sure about.
Yeah, I had just a follow-up question to ask you, Corban, about Jabari Smith. You kind of answered it in saying that like you're not sure what a leap from Jabari Smith Jr. would look like, but like let's think about it, right? Because the guy is 6'10", he in theory can shoot, but as Josh pointed out, he's been kind of league average so far. When I watched him as a prospect, I think the biggest concern I had is like, okay, how is he a number one option on offense? Because I didn't think the handle was there. And if he can't really get to spots on the floor, then like what is really an offensive leap that he could take outside of like, becoming a better tough shot maker and maybe just improving that spot up 3-point shooting. But like, is there something you see in like his post game or his handle or something that you could see a leap from? Or what have you seen from him that would that if he were to take a leap, like in what area would it even be in?
I think post game is one. I think offensive versatility. is probably one, right? Like his shooting, I think is coming along. Even if he hasn't been the best shooter, like he's still shooting 35% from three this season. That's 5% better than what's 30%, right? 35% for a big is good. You know what I mean? Like if you can get better than that, that's good. But at the base level for a stretch big or a guy who is stretch in his game to be able to shoot the three in this NBA, I'm sure they'll take it. They probably would take it at 34%, 33. Now we're playing games, but like 35 with upside, I think is important. Can he do more than that though? Is he a guy who's going to be able to have a little bit post-up game? Is he a guy who can maybe shake some bigs off the dribble? You know, is he a guy who can diversify his offensive skill set in that way? Defensively, more of the same of what he's been doing. I think he's definitely improved in that area. But offensively, what does that look like? And that was a big thing when he was drafted number 1 overall. And I mean, he was drafted number 1 overall, but that was a big thing when he was drafted. And I wanted him to be drafted number 1 overall, is I was trying to project what he could be as like a team fit. And ultimately, offensively, that's not come up to play. At the same time, still young, obviously not getting a ton of usage. So we don't even know what that looks like. But I say more than just the shooting. If you can give me something with a little either bounce, you know, little offense off the bounce, or a post-up game that kind of helps in the mid-post area to, you know, in addition to your pick and pop game that you love to do, maybe mix it up and take the basket and improve your finishing around the basket. I think those are some manageable things that he can do that will help him kind of grow as a player and really diversify his offensive skill set.
Yeah, I think like those are great points. I think just doing the little things around the margins offensively, like maybe being a little bit more effective on the offensive glass, being a little bit more effective as a cutter, right? Like doing some of that stuff, I think could make a big difference. I personally don't see like Jabari Smith number 1 or even number 2 like offensive creator. I just don't see that at this point. I think he's going to be more of a guy that his bread is going to be buttered on the defensive end, and then he's going to be a piece that hopefully doesn't hurt you too much on the offensive end. But yeah, like if he can improve in some of those areas on the margins on the offensive end, maybe he can leap into that being a slightly above average offensive piece. Josh, any thoughts on Smith Jr. and sort of his developmental trajectory?
I think, we saw in Summer League that, he did make some of those leaps, but that again is Summer League context, which is very different from NBA context. And like Corban said, there was a great shift in the team context this year with the introduction of Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, with Ime changing, some of the offensive focus, and with Şengün breaking out and, becoming more of a focal point. I think right now, all I'm looking for Jabari is to like actually become the shooter that he looked like he was. And to be fair, his free throw percentage is still fantastic. So like he probably is a better shooter than he has proven so far from 3 in the NBA. And if, let's say, Jabari Smith Jr. just becomes functionally, and the guy's 6'11", so it's weird to call him like a small ball center, but yeah. But if he's a small ball center who becomes an above average 3-point shooter, and has those defensive flashes, like that's a pretty like helpful piece for any team anyway. And then anything beyond that is kind of like, the cherry on top of the sundae. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to make a massive leap, but if he can just improve to above league average from 3 consistently, and continue to do what he's been doing when playing the small ball, again, 6'11", small ball 5 role, I think that's improvement enough to like warrant his place in this core moving forward.
All right. Well, yeah, I feel like that has been a very extensive and fun discussion on the Houston Rockets. Before we wrap up, do you guys want to just give a rundown of what you've got going on in your life to the audience here? We'll start with Corban, then go to Josh.
First of all, I want to thank you, Garrett, for taking on the hosting duties today. Not an easy job for anyone here, I'm sure. Josh, as always, a great conversation here with you as well, Garrett. It's been a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at Corban NBA, Corban NBA. We've put out a couple of these episodes this week. I feel like we've done 3 in a week and a half. So definitely make sure to have that content out. Definitely make sure to check it out. It's been really, really good stuff. A variety of, team building conversations and direction, philosophy, and all sorts of really interesting nuggets in between, like player personnel discussion, coaching evaluation, all of that with these shows. So definitely make sure to check that out. Round Ball Ramble, I didn't post it yet, but I did a small forwards ranking with my buddy Nick Andre. So that'll be coming up soon. Hoping to do another positional ranking here coming up this next week. In addition to just some NBA recaps and hopefully some more daily coverage as we get into the postseason. Aside from that, also check out the Next Pro show. Puma Next Pro Circuit got the top AAU high school players there, and we have a weekly show that we do that kind of highlights the players and the coaches and the programs. And so I'm happy to be the host of that show, or one of the hosts on that show, and really enjoy being able to do that. And so that comes out every week. It's a live show every Tuesday. So a lot of ball stuff, but that wouldn't have any other way. At Corban NBA.
It's always a pleasure discussing basketball with you two, and I was very pleasantly surprised at how much Corban and I actually kind of agreed upon in this discussion, considering how heated it had gotten prior to us hopping on the podcast. All with love, of course. But it's always a pleasure, my friends. And what I have going on is chasing a 16-month-old around all day. And when I'm not doing that, I help people who want to work in the basketball industry take the next steps to realize their dream career. So if that's something that is interesting to you, you can reach me at josh@myhoopscareer.com. Send me an email. We'll set up a call, and I'll see if I can help you figure out what the next step is for you specifically in building your dream career in basketball.
I gotta give me another of those.
Yep, Corban and I have both taken advantage of Josh's expertise. Definitely worth sending him a message and setting up an appointment for sure. And Corban, of course, I always got you whenever you need. It was Corban's flu game tonight. Whenever you need me to be your Scottie Pippen and I can just drag you over to the bench, I am here for you.
Wow, well played. Well played.
And I will gladly be the Dennis Rodman.
But you can find me on Twitter at Garrett Bugay. That's GarrettBugay. You can also check out my podcast, Duncan Dynasty, DUNKIN Dynasty. And we'll probably have these two on in the near future on that show to break down some upcoming playoff matches, because hopefully in the next week or so we'll at least have a couple of matchups solidified there to discuss. So looking forward to that. I always get very excited. It's my Christmas whenever NBA playoff season comes around. For Josh, for Corban, I'm Garrett. We're all frosty. You all stay frosty, and we'll be back real soon.